I don't know if my upstairs neighbors are moving furniture or having a dance class, but I apologize for the noise. Now there's traffic noise. Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of For the Love of Comics. Special because for the first time in our history, we've got mail. That is to say, a friend of this channel has sent us something. Paul Hatcher, all the way in the United Kingdom, has sent us this box of comics, which includes comics that he's created as well as what he self-effacingly calls real comics. I've been dying to get into this box, which arrived a couple of weeks ago, but I also wanted to share this momentous occasion with all of you, so I waited till I got a couple of planned videos out of the way, and the day is finally here for us to explore this box together. But before we dive into this box, I'd like to talk about some other comics also received over mail but not physical over email. A couple of weeks ago, comics veteran Andrew Peepoy reached out to me. This was after my first live stream in which I talked about classic comics in box sets, and Andrew Peepoy is a big fan of Crazy Cat and Carl Barks and Archie, all of whom I discussed in that video. He's worked on everything from Marvel DC stuff, Wonder Woman and X-Men, to Tom Strong's Terrific Tales and Tomorrow Stories, to Simpsons and Futurama, DuckTales, and Archie comics, with hundreds of pages and covers to his credit, including the cover of that Archie's Americana box set I was talking about. Andrew also has creator-owned comics, including The Adventures of Simone and Ajax, which he's been publishing in indie magazines and anthologies as well as online since 1994. And it is a couple of Simone and Ajax stories that Andrew sent me over email. Now, I'd never read any Simone and Ajax before, although I was familiar with Andrew's work on Fables, Tom Strong's Terrific Tales, and most recently the Simpsons comics that I've started reading. This is a silly, funny, all ages or children's comic starring Simone, a 20-something-year-old girl who's always ready to jump into adventure, and her long-suffering best friend Dinosaur, Ajax. The art is reminiscent of classic Archie comics. The adventures occupy a variety of genre, including detective story, pirate adventure, sci-fi space adventure. There's definitely a lot of influence of Karl Barks and Don Rosa's DuckTales, and given Andrew Peepoy's wide experience, it's not difficult to see where all of these influences come from. The Adventures of Simone and Ajax have been published in a variety of different formats, including a previous print collection of various web shorts, and a new volume of adventures is currently up on Kickstarter for another 3 or 4 days. If you're interested in a comic that feels like Archie or a Chaplin movie or a Marx Brothers movie, if you like puns and references, if you like the kind of animal-human interaction that you may see in Calvin and Hobbes or even Snowy talking to Tintin, check out The Adventures of Simone and Ajax on Andrew Peepoy's website and on Kickstarter right now. I checked out the Kickstarter page and it got funded within the first 9 hours of being live, so there are a couple of stretch goals that are now being unlocked, and I'll leave links to both Andrew Peepoy's page as well as the Kickstarter page in the description below. Both his page as well as the Kickstarter page have a lot of samples from this and other comics that he has worked on. Some of the stretch goals and some of the rewards levels include commissioned art, so take a look and see if it's of interest. And now let's take a look at some more comics straight from the creator in this box sent to us by Paul Hatcher. Here's a letter from Paul. I won't read the whole thing, but here's the introduction. Hi Anshuman, here we are as promised, a package of goodies all the way from Northampton, home to the great Alan Moore, myself, and about 200,000 others. No comics from the great Alan Moore, I'm afraid, but hopefully some rich pickings here and there all the same. And here Paul's provided me a blurb for each of the comics that he sent. So the whole letter is not for you, but I'm going to dive straight into this box and maybe get back to the letter if I need it to explain some of the things over here. First up, I have The People's Comics by Robert Crumb. I am a fan of Robert Crumb's. I know there are problematic aspects to his work as well, but as you can see, American Splendor, Robert Crumb right behind me on the wall over there. I have never heard of The People's Comics. I have some issues of Zap, early alternative Robert Crumb singles, but this is fantastic. I can't wait to get into it. I can already see over here a familiar book. The Bloody Cardinal by Richard Sala. I am so happy to have this book. I think Paul maybe does not like Richard Sala as much as I do, although maybe few people love Richard Sala the way I do. This is terrific and very signature art and color. One of the few Richard Salas that I had yet to get. Thank you so much. Then we get into The Future Beings, Sensational Space Stories. These, I believe, are by Paul himself. I seem to have a number of copies over here. Let's see what Paul has to say about The Future Beings. He says it took him 9 months of solid work. It still makes him laugh, but it doesn't work for other people. Well, I'll be the judge of that. I enjoyed coming up with the adverts. Oh, so it's got fake ads in it, which is something that I always get a kick out of. I think some of them you can see at the back over here, as well as inside. And it seems like a black and white crime adventure. But of course, as we could tell from the title itself, sci-fi as well. Excellent stuff, and I have multiple copies, so maybe I'll do a giveaway. Moving along, ooh. A couple of packets of Odd Sock by Paul Hatcher. I believe these are mini comics. Oh, they're multiple issues. I should probably read the letter. Odd Sock 1 through 8, my attempt at a weekly gag strip. He doesn't explain what it's all about, but it does sound like something he continues to work on. I think it's 2 batches of issues 1 through 8 of Odd Sock by Paul Hatcher. There's also a list at the back of other works by the same author, and I'm guessing I'm going to see a couple of them in this box. Here's another small staple zine, Lost in Space by Paul Hatcher. Down here it says 60 pages of okay material from my first 3 comics. Crime Watch Milky Way seems to be a pack of cards. Aliens you need to keep an eye out for. I can see that there are a number of cards inside this packet, written by Paul Hatcher, but with art by a variety of different artists. I look forward to opening these up. Then we have what looks like a couple of hardcovers. The World Stare Out Championship Final as seen on TV. And Chang Jin Ming's Guide to Refereeing Stare Out. Very interesting. And about that, he says it was originally self-published, and so there's a bagged edition of the self-published edition, plus 2 hardcovers. His big hit, including cards, signed photographs of the champion. I think the bagged edition is somewhere deeper inside. Then we have a couple of copies of The Town by Paul Hatcher, which he says he did for his grandmother, who was of the opinion comics were disposable and nothing more, but refused to believe that these were comics. Just that, I think, is very high praise. This is what the interior pages look like. Couple of copies of that as well. A couple more mini comics by Paul. House of Hatch, with a little Jurassic puke ad at the back, and The Red Bus. Paul says that he sold hundreds of copies of the House of Hatch at various music festivals and events for £1 a pop, and he says The Red Bus is not very good. Still, thank you very much. I look forward to reading them. Then we have a couple of books not by Paul, and right at the bottom, these are the bagged, self-published copies of the World Stare Out Championship Final, including posters and build your own mask and a whole bunch of other things that I'm sure are going to be explained to me in detail in the letter. Wow. And the last 2 books over here, the first is the award-winning international best-selling graphic memoir Paracueos by Carlos Giménez, Children of the Defeated in Franco's fascist Spain, foreword by Will Eisner. This is published by Eurocomics. I've never heard of this, but it looks fantastic. Paul has mentioned this to me, and he says that I'm sure you'll like it. I was very impressed and experienced a range of emotions reading it, both funny and tragic, but extremely well written and drawn. Thank you so much for bringing this book to my attention. And thank you very much for this very handsome edition. And the last book over here is Becoming Unbecoming by Una, which Paul says is a book that he bought on a visit to Leeds a couple of years ago. It was recommended by the comic shop owner because it was a local author, and it's an astonishing book. Here are some pages from inside this book. The blurb on the cover says, unflinching, heartbreaking, and utterly compelling. Thank you so much for this and for everything else over here. This was such a wonderful experience to go through this lovingly curated box, to see your individual expression in your work, as well as books that you like, as well as books that you know that I would like and enjoy. And this is quite moving, and one of the reasons why this channel brings me so much joy. It's like someone halfway across the world reaching out to connect through these things that we all enjoy. And I know that a lot of people say to me that, hey, you introduced me to this comic that I'd never heard of, or you brought this to my attention. But this box is just an example of how many times that happens with me as well, where people point out to me things that I'd never heard of, where people point me in directions that I love then traveling. So thank you so much for this. Thank you everyone who watches this channel and reaches out in the comments, now on the Discord, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. This has been a very special episode of For the Love of Comics. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.